The night my mother-in-law stood at the podium and declared that my husband deserved a completely different woman, the entire ballroom held its breath. I sat 12 feet away in my champagne silk dress, hands perfectly still, and smiled. Because by sunrise, the only person walking out of that room with their life still intact would be me. The chandelier lights above the ballroom shimmered like 1,000 tiny lies. I sat motionless in the champagne-colored dress I'd spent 2 weeks choosing, the silk cool against my skin, my fingers laced tightly in my lap so no one would see them tremble. My mother-in-law's voice rang out, clear and triumphant, cutting through the sudden hush like a blade. "This is the woman my son should have chosen from the very beginning." 12 feet away. That's how close I was. The room froze for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then polite applause rippled like distant thunder. I didn't cry. I didn't hurl my Chardonnay across the white linen. I simply smiled, small and steady, because in that single frozen moment, I already knew everything my mother-in-law didn't. I already knew everything my husband didn't. And by the time the string quartet picked up again, the only soul in that glittering cage who would leave unbroken was me. Let me pull you back to where it truly began. We had been married 9 years when the Harrove Tower project landed in his lap like a golden crown. His mid-sized real estate firm, co-founded by his late father and still quietly ruled by his mother, had never touched anything this massive. A 40-story glass and steel giant rising in the heart of downtown, worth more than every building they'd ever touched combined. My husband walked around the house those first weeks with a new electricity in his step, eyes bright, voice full of grand plans. His mother had stepped back from daily operations after her husband died, but she kept her iron grip on every major decision. She had never truly welcomed me. I was the structural engineer with her own salary, her own projects, her own reputation. Too independent, she'd once said at Thanksgiving. The kind of woman who doesn't know how to make a man feel needed. For years, we kept the peace with careful distance and tight-lipped smiles. My husband played peacemaker, I disengaged. We told ourselves the undercurrent of frost was normal. We had a renovated house we both loved, a rescue dog named after the street where we first met. 9 years of inside jokes, shared arguments, and quiet reconciliations. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then she entered the picture. The new co-development partner arrived in March. Harvard-polished, luxury high-rise veteran, the kind of woman who wore heels that cost more than my mortgage. The first time I saw my husband's reaction, it wasn't the loud flirtation you might expect. No, he grew quieter, more deliberate. His words about her became too neutral, too measured. When someone truly doesn't care, they don't rehearse indifference. By May, he worked weekends without explanation. By June, his phone lay face down on the kitchen counter like a guilty secret. I told myself I was paranoid. A 40-story tower demanded 40-story focus. The man who had cried at his father's funeral, who had held me through 2 devastating miscarriages, he couldn't be capable of what my gut was whispering. I was wrong. The first undeniable crack appeared in August. I was searching for a tax folder when a single credit card statement slid out, his name only, an account I had never seen. The charges painted a picture I never wanted to read. Intimate dinners at restaurants we'd never visited together. A luxury hotel in Charleston the same weekend he claimed to be at a conference in Atlanta. Another in Nashville 2 months later. A jeweler downtown. not the kind for watch batteries. My hands shook as I photographed every page. Then I slid the statement back exactly where I found it, walked into the kitchen, and started chopping vegetables for dinner, as if my world hadn't just tilted on its axis. That performance, the calm smile, the steady knife, still feels like the hardest thing I have ever done. Inside, a specific kind of grief settled in. Not the grief of loss, but the suffocating weight of knowing loss is coming. I understood the evidence. I understood what it meant. But I also understood that evidence without proof is just suspicion. And suspicion is something his mother would crush in a single elegant sentence. I needed to be surgical. So I waited. I watched. And I began to plan. That night, after discovering the statement, sleep refused to come. I lay beside him in the dark, listening to his steady breathing while my mind raced through every late-night meeting, every vague explanation, every time he'd kissed my forehead and said, "Don't wait up." The grief wasn't loud. It was quiet, suffocating, like concrete setting slowly around my lungs. I kept replaying the charges. $487 at Le Jardin on a Thursday he'd claimed he was stuck in traffic. $1,200 at the Charleston Harbor Inn. A $3,800 charge at Moreau & Sons Jewelers. Not a ring for me. Not an anniversary gift. Something else. Someone else. Or so I thought. The next morning I made coffee the way I always did. Black for him, oat milk for me, and watched him scroll emails at the kitchen island. He looked the same tousled hair, same easy smile when he glanced up and said, "You okay? You seem quiet." I smiled back, small and practiced. "Just tired." He nodded, satisfied, and left for the office. That was the moment I decided. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. I would find it myself. I started small. I photographed every unusual receipt I could find. I noted the dates he traveled versus the dates on the card. I created a private folder on my work laptop, password protected, cloud synced only to me, and began building a timeline. Every missed dinner, every weekend site visit, every time his phone buzzed and he tilted the screen away. I told no one. Not my sister, not my best friend, not even the dog who tilted his head when I whispered, "We're going to be okay," like I was convincing myself. 3 weeks later, I booked a consultation with a divorce attorney. Her office smelled faintly of lavender and printer ink. She listened without interrupting while I laid out the credit card photos, the timeline, the growing dread. When I finished, she leaned forward and said 3 things that anchored me. Document everything. Do not touch or move any joint money, and do not confront him until you have ironclad proof. I followed her instructions like blueprints. Precise, methodical, no emotion in the execution. What I uncovered next changed everything. While digging deeper into our shared accounts, carefully, never triggering alerts, I noticed small, consistent transfers from the Harove Tower escrow account. Not flashy amounts, never enough to scream fraud on its own, but steady, structured, always landing in an LLC I had never heard of, Horizon Crest Developments. The name appeared nowhere in our personal files, nowhere in the company's public records. I am a structural engineer. I know what happens when someone quietly removes supporting elements from a building. The cracks appear slowly at first, hairline fractures in plaster, doors that no longer close perfectly. Then one day the whole thing collapses without warning. My husband had been doing exactly that financially, removing load-bearing columns one careful withdrawal at a time. I took screenshots. I cross-referenced dates with project milestones. I photographed bank statements, wire confirmations, emails he'd left open on his laptop one careless evening. The total diverted so far, just over $340,000. Enough to ruin reputations. Enough to sink the firm if the investors ever found out. Enough to destroy the life we'd built together. I brought everything to my attorney. She brought in a forensic accountant, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and zero patience for excuses. 3 weeks later, the preliminary report landed in my inbox like a verdict. 4 clear instances of diversion. Shell company. No legitimate business purpose. Funds routed through intermediaries before vanishing into private accounts. And then the accountant said something that made the room tilt again. Another party has already been looking at these same accounts. Not the authorities. Not yet. A private financial investigative firm, hired discreetly by one of the major outside investors who'd noticed irregularities in the quarterly reports 8 weeks earlier. They had placed an analyst inside the project, officially a consultant reviewing timelines and budgets. Unofficially, she had been combing through every ledger, every invoice, every transfer. She had found more than I had, and the person she was investigating? My husband. Not because of an affair, because he had been laundering the skimmed funds through his new business partner's development company without her knowledge. The woman I had spent months hating in silence. The woman my mother-in-law had just publicly crowned as the better match. She wasn't the mistress. She was the one who had figured him out 3 weeks before I did. I sat in my car after that meeting, hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles ached, and let the realization sink in. I had been living inside the wrong story. The betrayal was real, deeper, uglier, but the cast was different. My husband hadn't chosen her over me in the bedroom. He had chosen greed over everything. Over me. Over his father's legacy. Over the investors who trusted him. Over the truth. And now, 2 separate investigations, hers and mine, were converging on the same target. The gala was 6 weeks away. That gave us time to align. My attorney reached out to the investor's legal team. Pieces fit together like rebar in concrete. My personal records, the Shell LLC details, 9 years of marital financial history. Their broader corporate access, wire traces, internal memos. Together we had enough to file. We chose not to tip our hand early. We waited. For the night his mother would stand at that podium and deliver her scripted triumph. For the moment the room would applaud her vision. For the exact second everything he had so carefully hidden would finally reach its breaking point. The weeks before the gala felt like walking across a frozen lake. Every step measured, every crack listened for. I kept the routine flawless on the surface. Breakfast together, quick kisses at the door, casual questions about the project that he answered with practiced ease. Inside, I was cataloging everything. The way his laugh sounded thinner when he mentioned her name. The late-night texts that made him angle his phone just so. The faint scent of unfamiliar cologne on his collar one Tuesday evening. I didn't hate her anymore. The woman I once imagined as the thief of my marriage had become something else entirely. An unwitting ally in a war I never asked to fight. Her team and mine had exchanged files through secure channels. We mapped timelines. We cross-checked signatures. We built the case brick by brick until it was unassailable. The investor whose money had been siphoned didn't want a public spectacle. They wanted precision. Freeze the accounts, recover what could be recovered, remove the rot before the entire structure collapsed. The gala, they decided, was the perfect moment. Not for drama, for efficiency. My mother-in-law had handed us the stage without realizing it. The afternoon of the event, I took my time getting ready. I smoothed the champagne silk over my hips, pinned my hair in a low chignon, applied lipstick the exact shade of quiet confidence. Not for him, not for the room, for myself. I wanted to remember the woman staring back in the mirror when the night was over. Steady, unshaken, standing on ground she had tested herself. The ballroom glowed under soft gold light. Tall arrangements of white orchids, flickering candles, a string quartet weaving Vivaldi through the hum of conversation. 60 guests in black tie and evening gowns drifted between high-top tables, champagne flutes catching the light like tiny stars. My husband moved through the crowd like he owned every inch of it. Handshakes firm, smiles wide, the picture of success. I watched from my seat and felt nothing but calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a controlled demolition. Dinner passed in a blur of small talk and plated courses. Then the speeches began. A few investors praised the vision. The project director rattled off timelines and milestones. Applause rose and fell politely. Finally, my mother-in-law stepped to the podium. She wore midnight blue, diamonds at her throat, the posture of someone who had spent a lifetime commanding rooms. Her voice carried the practiced warmth of old money and older ambition. She spoke of legacy, of her late husband's dreams, of her son's brilliance in carrying the torch forward. She painted the Harrove Tower as destiny made concrete. And then she turned slightly, gesturing toward the table where the business partner sat. "This," she said, her smile sharp as cut glass, "is the kind of partnership my son deserves. Ambition matched with sophistication, vision matched with execution. The right woman at his side makes everything possible." She didn't glance my way. She didn't have to. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Light applause followed. A few heads turned. My husband's jaw tightened for half a second, pride warring with something closer to unease. I sat perfectly still, hands folded, expression neutral, letting the moment stretch. Then she stood. The business partner. Not rushing, not angry, just rising smoothly from her chair, 3 tables away, her black gown catching the light as she straightened. The simple act of standing drew every eye in the room. She met my mother-in-law's gaze, not with venom, but with cool, unmistakable clarity. She was no one's prop, no one's trophy, no one's better choice. The room felt the shift before it understood why. At that exact moment, 2 men in dark suits entered quietly from the side door. No fanfare, no raised voices. They walked straight to my husband's table with the calm efficiency of people who serve papers for a living. One leaned down and placed a slim folder in front of him. My husband opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. Color drained from his face in slow motion. He looked up at the men, then across the glittering sea of tables, straight at me. I held his gaze. No smile, no anger, just steady. He understood. Not in a dramatic crash, not with shouting or tears, just the quiet, terrible click of realization. The foundation he had undermined for months, years, had finally given way. The escrow freeze, the civil litigation notice, the emergency injunction, all filed that afternoon, all already in motion. The quartet kept playing, oblivious for a few more bars. Then conversations stuttered. Guests exchanged glances, chairs scraped back. Small clusters began drifting toward the exits. My mother-in-law remained frozen at the podium, microphone still live, the triumphant speech dying on her lips. For the first time in the years I had known her, she looked small. Not broken, just diminished. The stage she had so carefully built had vanished beneath her feet. I rose slowly. My attorney waited in the marble lobby, coat over her arm. We walked out together into the cool October night. Behind us, the ballroom emptied like a theater after the final curtain. The legal aftermath was not cinematic. No swift gavel, no tearful confessions. Just months of depositions, document requests, sealed filings. Weeks of silence when nothing moved, and I would wake at 3 a.m. replaying every missed sign. I learned the hotel stays weren't romantic trysts. They were hand-delivered cash meetings, off-the-books transactions to keep the shell company invisible. No physical affair, at least none the investigators could prove, just methodical fraud, long enough to breed carelessness, long enough to believe he would never be caught. The divorce finalized 7 months later, assets divided with forensic precision, reflecting both the marriage's length and the damage his actions had done to our joint estate. I walked away financially secure, professionally untouched. My name never appeared in headlines. His mother hired separate counsel to fight parts of the company's financial history. That battle still simmers. His former partner filed her own suit for misrepresentation and damages. The Harrow Tower was restructured under new management. Construction continues. The building will stand someday. I won't be at the ribbon cutting. These days, I'm looking at a house on the edge of the city. It has good bones but a compromised foundation, cracks the previous owners ignored. The inspector pointed them out with a grimace. I didn't flinch. I know how to read stress points. I know which damage is fatal and which is fixable with the right intervention. I'm buying it. I'm going to reinforce what's solid and rebuild what isn't, because that's what I do. And if you're carrying your own version of that story right now, the one where you're counting someone else's lies, wondering what you missed, doubting your own sight, listen closely. The traces are already there. They don't always look like you expect. The truth isn't always the nightmare you fear most, but it is findable. You are capable of finding it. And when you do, you won't need fireworks or a public stage. You just need to be standing, solid, steady, when everything else finally gives way. That part was always within your reach.